Hello again. Thank you again for joining us today. My name is Nathan Rolfe, and I'm the president of the Association of U.S. Cyber Forces, and I'll be your host for this segment. On behalf of the Tortora Brayda Institute and the Association of U.S. Cyber Forces, I would like to welcome you to this month's episode of our Cyber Workforce Series, where we speak with cyber professionals about their careers and journeys to help them inform others on the diversity of paths within the cybersecurity industry, and hopefully support you, the listener, on your own personal cyber career journey. Before we meet this month's guest, I would like to share a little bit about the two organizations that make this series possible, the Tortora Brayda Institute and the Association of U.S. Cyber Forces. The Tortora Brayda Institute was created to promote collaboration across public and private sectors with a focus on business, culture, and diversity. Tortora Brayda looks to reshape and develop collaboration and partnering practices with a view to improving and securing business and economies. A core concept of the Institute is their think tank for partnerships in AI and cybersecurity. Think tank has allowed Tortora Brayda to bring together experts and leaders from the public and private sectors and academia around the world to reshape and develop collaboration and partnering practices while embracing the most critical technology growth. If you are not currently a member of the Institute, we invite you to visit their website at www.tortorabrayda.org to learn more and see how you can participate. The Association of U.S. Cyber Forces is a nonprofit professional association that provides the voice for members of the cyber workforce who serve in the military, government agencies, industry, and academia on specific cyber issues impacting national security. AUSCF is an advocate for positive change to policies and programs that better serve their membership and help minimize gaps between the private and public sector cybersecurity efforts. If you would like to learn more or join AUSCF, please visit our website at www.auscf.org. During today's discussion, please feel free to drop any questions into the chat, and as time allows, we will attempt to weave in the answers and your questions and feedback on these sessions that directly shape this and our future events. Today's guest is Emmett Moore. Emmett is the CEO and founder of Red Trident, an OT cybersecurity firm founded in 2014. With 25 years of experience in Industrial Controls and ICS OT cyber, his career spans a large array of different industries and support to both private and public sector organizations. His understanding of the complexity of OT cybersecurity is deep and well-rounded. He has supported the development and management of various OT cybersecurity teams focusing on threat intelligence, vulnerability research, vulnerability assessment, cyber programs, and remediation efforts for critical infrastructure. Emmett has supported some of the best industry work, such as development of the Global Industrial Cybersecurity Professional Certification, active engagement in the development of International Society of Automation security standards, and development of content and testing standards for several ISA certification courses. He is a founding member of the Center for Infrastructure Trustworthiness and Energy Systems, an industry university cooperative research center focused on solving energy-related cybersecurity challenges. As an active member in the OT cybersecurity community, he frequently assists the DoD, national labs, and business leaders with understanding of OT cybersecurity and the challenges those different sectors face. Emmett, welcome, and thank you for joining us today.
Thanks, Nathan.
So let's just jump right in, do some baselining. OT, or operational technology, is increasingly becoming a buzzword in the cybersecurity world. Can you help with our listeners? What exactly is OT, and why is it something seen that's different than what we're used to seeing in cybersecurity world?
Yeah, so OT is OT is all those systems that kind of don't fall within the IT realm, right? A poor definition. That's kind of what the OT community is trying to establish. Really what it is about is OT systems have unique requirements that they're sort of real-time requirements of industrial control systems, or they're controlling elevators, building automation systems, security systems. They have a lot of embedded requirements that sort of have timing issues. Where if your email goes offline for a couple minutes or a couple hours, it's disruptive, but it's not going to take down a plant. A control system goes down, a refinery goes down, water treatment, a pump stops pumping water to your house. The lights go off at home if a power plant goes off. Those type of systems are much more critical. And the way that they're built is designed around inputs and outputs, kind of controlling physical cyber systems. So, these systems have unique requirements of what they're trying to achieve. And so therefore they kind of have a lack of cybersecurity controls that kind of exist within the IT community.
Okay. And since this is kind of almost a really unique segment of what we're used to seeing in cybersecurity, how did you personally get involved in this? I mean, this isn't something that I have heard of degrees or anything like that focused in OT. So how did you get involved? How can somebody else get involved in this sector?
Yeah, so so my background, as you mentioned earlier, 25 years industrial automation. So I started my career up in manufacturing in the Midwest, working at a manufacturing plant. And so I was working for an R&D lab, learning PLCs, robotics, automation, control systems, and over about 12 years, worked in a lot of different sectors. Kind of moved around from manufacturing to automotive to thermoforming to heavy oil and gas, transportation. And they all use the same control systems, right? PLCs, DCS systems, SCADA systems you hear of. These systems kind of help control these processes, but they're sort of off the shelf. There's the same controller. Siemens makes them, GE makes them, Rockwell makes them. And so I just control them whatever the process engineer wants to make happen. Well, in about 2011, 2012, Stuxnet had just happened. Kind of everyone was talking about cybersecurity and industrial control systems. And I realized that all these wonderful systems that I was really proud of building for the companies I work for were all insecure. And I was making them insecure, right? I was connecting systems and semi-automated facilities from an ERP system down to a control system. I wasn't making sure that they were secure. It wasn't the focus of my job. It was about availability, reliability, running operations. And so I kind of, I was single. I didn't have a wife or kids or anything like that. So I dove into it. I was working for an integration company at the time. And I really started to understand how big of a problem this was. So I created a threat intel team. The company I was working for, Cymation, allowed me to help create a threat intel team, a reverse engineering team, a programs team. And we started looking really deeply into this problem. And we discovered that it's not just a huge problem. It's really, really hard to solve at an endpoint level, like an IT approach. And so diving into that, I started realizing that there's not a lot of training out there for people. OT cybersecurity, or back then it was ICS, cybersecurity, and kind of morphed into OT, was this big realm that I was kind of in a unique position, having an industrial automation background, but also a passion for cybersecurity. I might be able to help people, right? Help people understand this problem. And so the company I was with got acquired. Me and a couple guys decided to jump ship and start Red Trident in 2014, and solely focused on the OT cybersecurity piece. So we kind of early adopters into it, dove into it head first, and have been doing it ever since.
So you said a couple things real key on there. You mentioned that you were actually part of the folks making them insecure. Was that just because there was no real work position for cybersecurity in that industry at the time?
Yeah, like we knew IT security standards, right? So if it was a server, if it was an application layer, something more business related, then obviously you'd add security to it to some degree. But once you got into the control system, there wasn't really a lot of security you could even apply. And it wasn't being trained in electrical engineering or controls, industrial controls or INC guys. We weren't being trained at all that this was even a risk. That's obviously something in the last 10 years, 12 years that you've seen a huge change. Pretty much everybody in the controls world knows OT cybersecurity is a thing. And depending upon what industry you're in, you're heavily engaged or maybe not as much engaged into it. But back then it was barely even a conversation.
Because that wasn't necessarily part of your job, as you mentioned earlier. How did you, I guess, get started from the cybersecurity aspect of that? Was that a hobby that you were doing on the side, or another background that you had that you brought into that career field?
Nope, I was lucky. So we kind of looked into this. I was a product manager at first, right? And one of my first products being tasked to me was kind of this ICS cybersecurity piece. And I had some great mentors, Clint Bodungeon, Eddie Ferguson, kind of great guys that I had on my team. And I sucked up everything I could from those guys, and I shared my knowledge of controls engineering back to them, which created this awesome cycle of kind of learning evolution of understanding more and more about the deep dive of embedded technologies, control systems, the OSs that run them, how the real world looks at, kind of risk and threats. And so by bringing all that together, we kind of understood, hey, this is a big issue, and it's a great target for bad guys, right? For adversaries to go after a target is, a completely insecure network that can take down all your mission critical systems. And so we just kind of dove on it over the course of a couple of years, and really started to hone what we understood to be OT cybersecurity at the time.
Awesome. So from that threat intelligence side, or just that OT cybersecurity, analyst and and manager, what does kind of a typical day look like then for you as you're going to other entities or other companies helping with their OT? Or is there even an average typical day?
Yeah. So if we kind of back up and we ask, where are most entities? Most entities are not at the continuous monitoring stage yet, right? Some are. They have different tools out there, the clarities and the zomies, and they're doing anomaly detection, and they're kind of feeding some sensor and telemetry into a SIEM. For those people, the day is just like a traditional SOC, right? It's the response that I tell people is sort of the change. Yes, people will argue with me that the signals coming in from a PLC or from an OT network is a little bit different than an IT telemetry that comes in. You get better visibility and better granularity on the IT side. But how you respond to things is typically going to be about the same, right? You triage, you look at your level 1, you start correlating some of your tools and things like that. And very quickly, you're going to flip it over to more of an OT or operations team and say, hey, guys, I'm seeing this. Is there something there, right? Because that operations team is going to be able to tell you, like, yes, I'm working on the PLC, or I'm working on the DCS system now, or we had an outage, or something happened, somebody cut a pipe in the ground, or a fiber optic cable. So you kind of have to support that physical side of OT that doesn't really exist in the IT realm. And that helps a lot. One, minimize the amount of sort of knowledge that the analyst has to have within a SOC, and transfers it over to somebody that's really a specialist of those systems and those assets that they're maintaining.
All right. We actually have a question that came in the chat here. What KPIs do you use to prove concept? I don't know, quite sure what they're asking on that one. Is that something that makes sense to you, Emmett?
No. I wouldn't know off of the SOC. I mean, obviously, you do the same telemetry that you typically do within a SOC and do your KPIs of a SOC. But from a, I mean, there's a bunch of ways we could have a conversation around that, KPIs and KRGs and things like that within a security program.
All right. So if you want to kind of expand on your question, we can circle back around on that one. But let's keep talking a little bit more about from the career job aspect, Emmett. I mean, like I said, we're here to kind of look at what it takes to get into this type of work and the interest in that one. You've done a lot of work when it comes to development of certifications and the education side. It sounds like, as you described, working together with others in your industry, that you kind of helped develop a lot of the work around this. Would you recommend for someone that's looking to get into more IT-focused cybersecurity that they pursue some of those certifications, or go that more traditional education route, a standard 4-year degree at a college or something similar?
I would. So I would probably say my traditional, and this is me being a little bit older than the younger crowd, right? And I think there's two approaches, right? And I'll kind of talk through them. The older approach is go after the certs, right? If you've been doing this a little while and you have a little bit of IT security knowledge and you want to get more into OT, certs are going to be the way to go, right? But more than that, it's understanding the systems. And what I tell people all the time is OT cybersecurity is not necessarily an entry-level career. It is almost a senior level career shift. You're going to do a lat move from doing IT or systems or controls engineering, whatever it may be, threat intel, governance, and you're going to lat move over to OT. And the reason why is because you're bringing half of your knowledge to bear into that realm. Whether you're a controls engineer and you understand control systems and you're learning cyber, whether you're a threat analyst, learning OT control systems, whether it's a governance person, programs and policies and IT, ISO and all that stuff, learning the more GRC realm in OT. OT is not matured enough to have a fast track lane to train you from when you're in high school or college all the way through to get you to an entry level position. It's just there's too much disparity in that gap, and I hate to turn people away, but that's the honest truth. Is you have to sort of know some of the job to be able to get into the job. My mom always used to tell me, know 50%, another 50% you can learn, right? So within an analyst route, yeah, you can go work in a SOC. And like I said, the telemetry and analysis and correlation stuff that you're working in a SOC is going to be much like an IT SOC. So you can get an entry level position there. But you're not necessarily learning control systems. You're not necessarily learning threat intel, or you're not learning governance, something that's going to help advance the security posture. I mean, you could do SIEM engineering, you could do things like that. So I kind of tell people, get more involved in the electrical engineering side, the control systems. Like, we spend a lot of time as IT security folks learning computer systems as kids. Like pretty much everybody that's under 35 grew up with a computer. And so you have years and years and years of experience work with computers, the operating system, the back end, how it works, what it can do, all these features and functionality. And when you get into cyber, most of those people start diving into more of what that system does. With an OT, a lot of people jump into it and say, hey, I'm an OT cybersecurity person because they want to get into this new field, but they don't really understand the controls. They haven't spent time to learn not only how to program it. It's one thing to play with a PLC and program it, but what can it do? How does it actually work? How do you break it? How do you make it go better? How does the industry use them? And I think that's one of the deficiencies that is lacking sometimes when I see IT practitioners kind of come over the fence. Is they're very quick to go, I know cyber, I know systems. Cool, that's great, but these are a little different, and please spend the time to kind of learn the uniqueness of the environment. It'll go a long ways with a lot of people.
So do you have any recommended starting points then? You mentioned things like governance and SOC analysis, kind of some background, that 50% that you mentioned from your mother's quote going forward. What are some other areas that are probably, I'd say, your best baselines then for someone that is looking 5-10 years down the road to make that shift in IT to really build that foundation first?
Yep. So I'd say there's sort of two tracks. One, you can go more of an academic route of maybe taking some courses of electrical engineering, specifically around PLC controls or instrumentation controls. There's a book out there that ISA makes called the Automation Book of Knowledge. Book of Knowledge. It's designed for a control engineering test, right? If you want to get like your certified automation professional, your CAP cert, that understands all the control theory, how controllers work, I/O, inputs and outputs, and all this stuff around control systems. It's more than what a cyber person needs to know, but you'll dive in and you'll start to appreciate what these control systems are actually doing from a functionality standpoint, and why, if you hack it or you compromise it, what the risk is, right? The other side is more of playing with Arduinos, DIY it, right? An Arduino's embedded controller, you can do parallax, PICs, all these different microcontrollers that are out there, even some of the ESP32s. When you're programming, you're going to learn electrical theory at a electronic level. And if you're running like an RTOS, a real-time operating system, and you put an RTOS on that little embedded controller, what can you do with it, right? You don't connect it the same way you connect a computer, right? You might have a USB port, you might not. But how is the round-robin system working? How is the OS actually working? And what is the interrupt routines? And why are those important for that functionality, which is different than running like an x86 Windows or Linux machine, right? So all of a sudden you start learning that, the operating system is different and how it works and the functionality and why interrupts are built differently with an RTOS versus how we're more of a sequential logic with a Windows computer. That's a huge eye-opener for most people once they start realizing that fundamentally these systems are different. And then when you start building something on it like a traffic light, why is that such a different thing, of sequencing and timing, and why is the timing important? And then all of a sudden they start kind of opening up and go, it is different. I do understand it's got uniqueness. I know why. Now, how do I protect it?
So you mentioned some really good things there. The Arduino, I think, is actually great because when I think of electrical engineering, I think high level education, you go off to MIT, years of school, things like that. Arduino was a kit I could buy on Amazon. I mean, I bought my son one when he was in middle school that he played with. There's definitely some in between in there. Without necessarily endorsing, are there any other types of training environments, training providers out there, or even different types of classes that you're aware of at schools that someone can look into to get a little bit more of that hands-on that you described to help build that knowledge without committing to a master's degree at an Ivy League school?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a huge STEM supporter, right? My kids are pretty heavy into robotics and automation and stuff. And so I'd say if you can get into some sort of robotics course, take a summer camp in robotics, you're going to learn a lot of why a PLC or a control system is set up and configured the way it is, and what happens when you start overloading it, and why that's bad, right? You always want to keep your code small and light and nimble, and versus a computer's program at home that you're running, you can run gigs of stuff on it, crunching a whole bunch of information. You can't do that with a robot, right? It's gonna glitch. It's gonna start operating all weird. It's not gonna respond to your controls as fast as you want it to, and that's sort of that jump into that cyber physical realm where, when I want my robot to go forward, I want it to go forward now. Well, why is it not going forward now? Why is there a delay? Why is there this? And if your code is too big or too small, that might be there. And I think that's a great way for people to kind of jump in and learn kind of control theory. They learn electronics. They learn this unique RTOS operating system that's different than what they're used to. And next thing you know is they kind of, now look at it from a cybersecurity perspective. Plug in a computer and try and scan it, right? It comes back with wrong information. Oh, well, my computer doesn't do that. Well, a Nessus scanner or, Nmap or whatever, we're going to go out and scan it. It doesn't find any vulnerabilities, or it doesn't find the ports that are open, or it doesn't find the proper system enumeration. That's the unique challenges that are starting to be faced with OT, is that, hey, we can't use these IT tools and concepts into this realm. And now you're starting to get to that security engineering, security understanding, governance, reading the policies and procedures, and the specifications out there, and what controls are they recommending? How are they recommending to be implemented? How is it different than IT if you like the governance route?
All right. Let's take a minute here before we get too much later to circle back around to the chat. So following up on the KPI question, are they more quantitative or qualitative? And in other words, what does success look like? Hopefully that helps kind of help with the response to the previous question.
What KPIs do you use to prove a concept? I'm still the concept of cybersecurity tools, concept of a SOC analyst, bringing telemetry in and saying it's a good signal to kind of bring in, or
pending further information, I say take your best guess on that.
Yeah, I mean, from a I'll pick on where I typically see quantitative and qualitative analysis, right? It's sort of risk assessments and risk analysis of looking at. It's not really a concept, so it might be a little bit different. But risk assessments today are typically more quantitative, right? There's a lot of opinion based into it. We're trying to build better models right now on 62443, the ISA standard, ISA 99 group. On 3-2, we're trying to create a new way to do risk assessments, or better way to do it. Because what we're seeing is that there's too much subjectivity from one assessor to another. And so what we're finding is that based on your background, your knowledge, your experience, and the information you have access to, you may evaluate one risk better than another, right? And that's really bad, because say I go and do a risk assessment and I go get a whole bunch of threat intel data and historical data, and I understand the risk of the systems a little bit better. I go in there and I start build my risk analysis. My risk analysis is going to be very detailed and very factual, so it'll be more qualitative. But if you start going over towards the other side, where maybe it's a more junior person, they haven't got a lot of experience, you're going to get data that's maybe it doesn't show it as risky. A risk that's not as risky, or maybe a risk that is perceived to be risky, is defined as a higher risk than it should be. So we're trying to kind of flesh that out in the risk assessment methodology right now in OT.
Okay. All right. Thanks. We'll go back a little bit more to, I guess, on the career side discussions, because we're down in our last 5 minutes here. If you have someone that's gotten into the OT cybersecurity world, or starting to get into it because they've followed some of your advice and built that foundation, started moving that kind of lateral shift over there, what are some things that they can do to help set them apart from their peers that are also following in your tracks? Are there any other higher level certifications, special training, special knowledge niches that they can focus on to help their skill set?
Yeah, so So one thing I'm always looking for is passion, right? Those that have passion typically do a couple different things, and then they exude it out. Network. The OT community is a very small community. Most of us that work in it know each other. It doesn't matter that you work for a competitor company or somewhere else. There's a lot of my good friends that work for the competitors. Once upon a time, they work for me, or they work for another company with me, or we've collaborated on projects. Network around the globe. I think Rob Lee with Dragos said once upon a time there's 300 or 500 people or 1,000 people globally. I'd probably agree. There's probably 1,000, 2,000, maybe 3,000 people globally that I'd say are really good OT cybersecurity practitioners that have been doing this quite a while. There's a lot more people that are getting into it and learning and growing, but network. Two, technical knowledge. Dive into it. Find what you love. If you love compliance type stuff, GRC, dive into the OT standards, whether it's 6243, NIST 882, API 1164, NERC SIP, whatever it may be. Dive into it, understand those compliance frameworks and kind of what they entail and what the challenges are that the industry is about. Or if you want to be more security, everybody loves being a hacker, right? Everybody loves trying to attack systems. So if you do it, don't just focus on the tools to do it, right? Go learn actually how these systems work so you can create your own concepts and your own understandings. Relying on Nessus or Nmap or any of the open source tools out there to go do vulnerability scanning, they don't really work all that well in OT. So take a step back and say, what is the intent of the tool? How could I craft my own tool? And what are what do these environments look like so that I could be a better offensive security analyst? And then obviously if you're an engineer, learn the systems, learn controls. You kind of sit between both of those realms, right? Between the offensive side and doing vulnerability research, and then the other side of GRC. How do you merge those together with businesses? Most people are going to pick one of the GRC side, or the offensive security is really where the fun part goes for most people, I think.
Awesome. Great advice. I appreciate that. I guess one of my last questions here, if as folks have moved into this, what are some recommendations that you have, either besides networking, which you covered, which I think is actually extremely important, that someone can do to stay abreast of changes in this field? Are there any types of blogs, sites, other types of engagements that they can be involved in that kind of really help stay up with the state of the art?
Yeah, so I would say a couple things. One, maybe you're not a contributor to standards, but I think being on standards committees is a great way for people to kind of see the dialogue of different SMEs of what's out there, right? So you can hear the dialogue that's happening and some of the challenges that people are facing and kind of be aware of what's happening. I think that's a good way to kind of learn, right? Some of the challenges that the industry face. The other is conferences. Go to conferences. There's a lot of good ones like S4, in I think it was Orlando this last time, or Tampa, but it's typically in Miami. Go to S4, the ICS conference in Atlanta. If you can make it out to SANS, any of the ICS kind of focused conferences, manufacturing security conferences. Government's running a couple that they're talking about OT tracks. I think pay attention to those tracks and kind of learn what people are really talking about and some of the challenges that the end users are having, right? The owner operators. Because the more you understand their problem, the more you can kind of go, okay, that's what their challenge is. Why is it a challenge? What can I do to help? What do I need to learn? Is it something I'm interested in? If you have the passion for it, dive into it. If not, then you'll kind of go a different direction. So,
all right. Thank you. And like so many of these episodes, our time is too short together, so we're actually having to wrap up. But with the great connections or activity we see on the LinkedIn and the chat side and everything like that, we're going to go ahead and put up your LinkedIn profile for folks that want to reach out and connect with you to maybe follow up, maybe help re-engage in some of those questions we weren't able to quite get to on the chat today, and other things. Because in the spirit of networking, I think you're absolutely right. Finding mentors like yourself is going to help a lot of folks really break into this. So Emmett, thank you again for sharing your experience with the community today as well. For those watching and listening to our discussion today, thank you as well for that activity. We really appreciate it. Today's discussion will be posted and available via both the Tortora Brayda and AUSCF websites. And to close, just want to say again that Tortora Brayda Institute and Association of U.S. Cyber Forces are committed to reshaping and empowering diverse collaboration and developing the cyber workforce. And you're the reason why we do what we do. We hope today's conversation has helped you on your cyber professional development path. And on behalf of Tortora Brayda and AUSCF, thank you, and we look forward to you joining us for our next Cyber Workforce Series discussion. And Emmett, thank you again.
Thanks, guys.